Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. So today we're going to talk about how to run an NCBI-Style Hackathon. We've run about 17 NCBI-Style Hackathons, 15 sort of Sensu Strict 2 hackathons so far. And we've built a lot of novel software. So the goal of these events is to collaboratively build a number, typically 4 to 8 pieces of software, and get that to alpha or beta state in 9 to 10 hour days. And really what we're very interested in is building pipelines that define new functionality. So for example, now you can call snips on the fly, streaming data straight from fast queues at rest. So that's something we're real proud of, and we have some ready-made genomic robots that will anonymize that data for you as well. And we're really moving that into pipelines to look at complex genotype, phenotype information for precision medicine. We've also developed some sensitive tools for novel virus discovery in the hackathons. So this is a project that we've been working on for close to a year in a series of hackathons now. First, making an extremely sensitive virus discovery pipeline. And then that evolved to be able to deal with endogenous viruses by using a sort of IO-dependent De Bruijn grapher, if you will, extending contigs on the fly. We then ported that into Python and then made it able to also characterize known viruses. So, and that work continues by a number of groups as well as in future hackathons. One of the other things we've been able to do that I personally think is very neat is to be able to give credit to a whole bunch of different people that have worked on different parts of these projects. And there's a platform called osf.io, and one is able to get DOIs for software projects that may not be published upon. So we've been able to do that. That's something we can be very proud of. We've also built a pipeline for antibiotic resistance detection. Certainly, it is not the only pipeline out there for antibiotic resistance detection, but it is extremely easy to use, containerized, can be deployed pretty much immediately on cloud infrastructure. Lately, we've done some work with machine learning. So we've taken 8-mer sequences and made them 20-dimensional vectors. And by doing this, we're able to tell contamination in plant genomes for contaminants that are not present in public databases. And it's about as sensitive as BLAST is with things that are in public databases, about 92%. And I'd like to remind you that we've done all of this in 3-day hackathons, almost all of this in 3-day hackathons. And that's something that is extremely exciting to me. And it's also a lot of fun to work with just an immense amount of really smart and neat people. And so today, what we'd like to talk about is sort of the philosophical aspects. I'm going to go over a few more things that we've built in these hackathons. And then Lisa is going to go into the logistical necessities for running these hackathons. And then finally, we'll close with 10 tips for running these types of hackathons. So, but before I tell you about some of the things we've built, I'd like to give you a brief overview of what these hackathons are. So there are many types of hackathons. Some that you may be familiar with are competitive type hackathons, where over days, weeks, months, something like that, many groups work together to try to find the best solution for a problem and compete for a prize. In that sense, our hackathons are a little different. We put together teams, typically of 5 or 6 individuals, who typically don't know each other, and we ask them to work together to build a project with novel functionality. And every team in our hackathons works on something different. Lately, some of the teams have been working on projects that were started in other hackathons, but Every team that gets started starts with a novel bioinformatics or data science goal. And about 80% of our teams finish a prototype that's sort of in the alpha or beta state. And about 10% of the teams publish a manuscript on the work they've done in a hackathon. And that's something that we're also very proud of. So I'd like to highlight some of the projects we've built over the last 3 years in these hackathons. And then again, Lisa's going to talk a little bit about the logistics. One of the things that we've built in hackathons are educational resources. So a team led by Frederick Tan was able to build an RNA-seq mapper tutorial that runs on a variety of cloud infrastructure. And about 1,000 people, as far as we know, have taken this tutorial. And we actually worked it into an online workshop that we gave here at NCBI. Several other educational resources, including Jupyter notebooks, have been created in NCBI Hackathons. We're in the process of deploying those in cloud environments. We ran a couple of hackathons in 2015, but in 2016 we really expanded them, running them both at NIH as well as at other institutions and at conferences. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that HackSeek was started by some graduate students in Vancouver and now is close to its third iteration, running independently of NCBI. And I really hope that those of you listening today might consider running your own NCBI or NIH style hackathon at your institution. And if we can help you in any way, we'll try to do so. As all of you know, metadata is a major issue in bioinformatics and data science. And one of the projects we did was to try to help librarians at the National Library of Medicine curate biological metadata for 14,000 RNA-seq data sets in Drosophila. And we actually used those data sets in a collaboration with Flybase to help reannotate the Drosophila genome. That collaboration is ongoing. And I think this shows that these hackathon projects can really have a significant impact on the larger scientific community. But as I mentioned before, we also really try to push the envelope and do some novel things. Really impressive team at a hackathon at Cold Spring Harbor loaded 7 whole human genomes into graphs. To my knowledge, this was the first time that whole human genomes had ever been loaded into graphs. And if you're interested, you can go to the GitHub repo, which is under the NCBI Hackathons GitHub organization. We've also done a few projects on finding immunogenic peptides in RNA-seq samples. We're very interested in trying to deconvolute the problem of immunogenic peptides. And in fact, Sage Bionetworks has set up a sort of whole subgroup to look at this specific problem. So we're hoping to collaborate with them in the future. Another project I'm particularly proud of has immediate application in the clinical realm. So this is a project we built and published on called Danger Track. Basically, this is a public blacklist for clinical geneticists to warn them that they may be calling SNPs in regions of the human genome that are unstable, and hence the SNP calls may be invalid. This is a product that actually has bedside applicability. In 2017, we turned back to really the educational aspects of these hackathons. And in addition to production, in addition to the networking, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we really wanted to reinforce computer science concepts to the hackathon attendees. So we spent a lot of time with ways to interface between domain experts who write code, and users of their software, including Docker, Flask, Jupyter, Mongo, and Shiny. And so we were able to build some end user products such as Fenvar. If you put in an RSID at fenvar.colorado.edu, you'll get a word cloud of phenotypes co-mentioned in PubMed. In addition, underneath, you'll get a JavaScript graph, an interactive JavaScript graph of a whole bunch of SNPs and publications that mention them. We were also able to take existing workflows and containerize them such that they are much easier to distribute for the bioinformatics community. And we also did an experiment. As many of you know, at NCBI, we have an API known as eutils, and there's a command line implementation of that called eDirect. We did an experiment to see if we could just distribute simple command line scripts in a cookbook fashion to computational biologists that use eDirect. This project has been very successful. And if you're interested in it, you can just Google for eDirect cookbook. This is pretty applicable to both folks who are interested in the genomic space and also the literature space, as there's a lot of applications of this particular API with PubMed abstracts. As I mentioned, we built Jupyter notebooks for education, and we were able to set up some collaborations. So this slide was not made by NCBI. This was in fact made by the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. And as you can see on the left, NCBI is cited by them as a data repository. However, their API did not work with the NCBI data repository. So what we managed to do was to glue their API, their Reads API, to the NCBI Reads API. And now you can use the GA4GH API to access NCBI data in the SRA. We're also interested in modular software development. This is a project I'm particularly proud of because the project leads on this project from Northwestern University Medical School really wanted to come and build a novel viewer for gene expression and aging. But the first thing they discovered upon arriving at the hackathon is that there are at least 36 RNA-seq viewers. So instead of building a standalone viewer, they built modular tools which would plug in to existing RNA-seq viewers. You can check this out, try this tool, and the videos are really neat. You can, in this particular case, they plugged it in to an ideogram viewer of whole genome expression in the mouse. And you can actually watch whole regions of the genome turn on and off during aging. We've also built some tools for the natural language processing community. This is a very simple tool called PubRunner. And what it does is it updates the PubMed corpus for people who are running natural language processing tools. The exciting thing about this is we've been able to also integrate an agricultural corpus with the help of the National Agricultural Library. And I believe the next step is to integrate the PubMed Central Open Access dataset. We've helped out with other people's hackathons in some collaborations with SVAI. There'll be another one of those hackathons in May, and also BioIT. And there'll be another one of those hackathons in May. And we'll work on the verification of data projects as well as the metadata that describes our data sets. If those are things you're interested in, check out BioIT and also our hackathon site, which I'll show you in a minute. In addition, like I said, we publish about 10% of our projects. And that's really, to me, big motivation, as scientific publication is often very time consuming. And so to see graduate students be able to get publications out after 3 days of work and about a few weeks of very part-time editing is really inspiring, and I think is hopeful for the future of scientific communication. In addition to that, we strive to build a community of hackathon alumni. So we have a LinkedIn group of hackathon alumni. We can pass out job announcements and a whole bunch of other stuff. And really, we want people to network with each other. One thing that is particularly heartening is that a lot of hackathon participants come back. And if you're interested in running a hackathon at your institution, I would highly recommend seeing if there are hackathon alumni at your institution or in the area who want to take part. So this is a non-exhaustive list of some of the hackathons we have coming up. And as details for those things start to converge, we add those hackathons to the list. You can also see some of the hackathon products I've mentioned today if you navigate to this website, NCBI-Hackathons.github.io. This year, we're really, I think we're focused on working with domain experts to build professional-grade software in data science. So we're particularly interested in project management as well as product management. And we're also interested in doing a bunch of machine learning projects because that's an exciting area of data science. And also, if I type the words machine learning into any project description, 50 people sign up for it. Some of these projects are expanded in the NCBI Visiting Bioinformatician program. If you're interested in that program, please email the address below for more information. At this point, what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to Lisa Federer, who's going to talk about logistical considerations for the NCBI and NIH hackathons.
Thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. I hope that you're all feeling excited and inspired now that Ben has talked a little bit about what has come out of some of these hackathons. But I imagine you're also wondering how it's possible that people managed to get all of this science done in 3 days. And I have to say that having been involved with a lot of these hackathons, it's incredibly impressive to see what people are able to get done. But to make that really work, there's a lot that goes into the planning and the preparation for that. And that's what I am going to spend a little time talking about, so that if this is something that you are finding interesting, you can do it at your own institution. Everything that I'm going to talk about here is documented in further detail on the GitHub repo that the link is on the screen right now, which I'll show again at the end, that actually came out of an NCBI hackathon that I'll talk a little bit more about. So the first thing to think about is, what are the projects or the problems that you're going to be tackling at your hackathon? And there's a few things that I think are important to consider when you're selecting what kinds of projects you'll be working on. The hackathons that we have done at NCBI are a little different from some of the competitive hackathons that you may have heard about before, where there's basically one broad topic proposed and people bring their own projects or solutions. Here, there's basically several sort of problems or projects predefined, and people will come and try to work on those. So one of the important things to consider is the project scope. Keeping in mind that you have typically 3 days to work on this sort of problem, it's important to select a project that is going to be something that's feasible to do within 3 days. I think some of the times that I've seen teams struggle is when they had a project that was just too big for them to take on, and so they knew that they weren't going to be able to get it done by the time 5 o'clock on the last day rolled around. Another thing that's really important in thinking about the project is ensuring that you have a team lead for each of the problems or projects who's going to be able to give some leadership and some subject matter expertise in that problem. The team lead is typically someone who has a little bit more experience, and they're able to take sort of a project management role on the team and sort of guide the approach the team is taking to the problem. And this can also be a great way to solicit some problems if you are maybe someone who doesn't have as much scientific background and you're organizing a hackathon. Picking out people who you think will be good team leads and getting them to suggest problems can be a useful approach. Another consideration is what sort of computational resources as well as data will be needed, especially the data aspect. A lot of teams in the past have had issues with wanting to solve a particular problem, but finding that the data that they need to get it is not readily available. So this is something that may involve a little bit of background work and research to make sure that everyone's ready to go when the hackathon starts. Another consideration is what is the level of experience and particular skill set that your participants are likely to have. I think this is really important to communicate to participants. If people will be expected to code in R or Python or whatever it might be, it's important that people know that before they come in. If this is going to be a highly, bioinformatics related event or something that's a little more clinically focused, you want to think about basically what sort of information will people need before they come to ensure that everyone's going to have a good experience. And then I also think it's worth looking at what's already been done in this area. There have been teams at hackathons that I've been at that have a great idea and they do some good initial work, and then like halfway through the hackathon they find out somebody's already built this tool, now is this for nothing? So doing a little legwork before the hackathon starts just to sort of ensure that you're not reinventing the wheel can save some headache later. So setting up the background problems are important. Getting people to come is also really important. So some things that we have learned in working on hackathons, one is to make sure that you advertise widely. People are generally excited and very interested in coming to hackathons, but it's important to make sure that you get the word out through as many different venues as possible to attract a wide audience of people from different backgrounds and different skill sets, and so you have a unique kind of interesting team to work with. Diversity and inclusion is something that's also really important. There has been some work done previously on some of the issues with, for example, involving women in hackathons and how maybe they're underrepresented. So think about how can you advertise in certain places that might reach a more diverse audience. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it's also useful to think about what people will need to know when they come into the hackathon and clarify that in any announcement that you send out. If there is going to be a particular coding language, like I said, used with a particular project, make sure that you get people who know that coding language. I was a member of a hackathon team once that it turned out we had to write the tool in JavaScript, and none of us really knew JavaScript, so we didn't get done quite as much as we had hoped in that project. So that kind of thing to help attract an audience who will be able to solve the problem. Another thing to think about is what kind of support staff will you need while you're there. There's a lot of energy in a hackathon room and there's a lot of people, but there's also some support that is needed to make sure that all of that energy gets channeled into getting stuff done. For example, having some sort of a system administrator who's there to work on some of the IT kinds of issues. I am a librarian by training, and I have been involved in several hackathons as sort of the on-site librarian, providing some different support in some ways that I'll talk a little bit more about. And even just little things like who is going to be there to refill the coffee when it runs out or whatever. So think about sort of who might be needed to assist with a hackathon during the event. And then once you've started to gather participants, then you can start to think about forming teams. One of the things that Ben mentioned is that a lot of times these are teams that are not people that come together as a pre-formed team, but they're people that you place on a team based on their interests and their expertise. And a lot of times these teams are people who have never met each other before. And that actually turns out being really beneficial for those people in many different ways. There's a lot of networking that gets done, especially for earlier career researchers and students. It can be a really great way to make some connections. And then there's also a lot of people that will come who have different kinds of expertise or even just sort of different ways that they've approached problems. And to get that sort of cross-pollination of ideas can be really exciting. So I think, forming teams that have sort of diverse membership and bringing in different expertise is a great way to ensure that your scientific problems that you're solving are going to have, good solutions, but also you're going to ensure an exciting and interesting experience for your participants. So in terms of logistics for preparing the event, a couple of things to think about. This is, a 3-day event that has a lot of preparation to make sure that things go smoothly. I kind of think about it as like planning a wedding. Like you have to, think about all the little nitty gritty parts of things and, how you're going to keep people happy the whole time they're there. So one of the things to think about is where are you going to have this event? Typically when the NCBI hackathons that I've been involved with have a number of different teams, maybe 5 to 10 teams of 4 to 8 people each. So as you can imagine, that can get kind of loud with people talking back and forth. So it's useful to have some spaces where people can break out into their groups and not have sort of that roar of that many people talking at once. But it is also nice to have a space where the whole group can come back together. As I'll talk about in a minute when I show an example schedule, it's nice to have sort of a time when the groups can come together and present what they've done so far in an ongoing fashion. And so having a space that can accommodate the whole group is also very useful. Sort of really basic consideration is you're going to have a lot of people over the course of 3 days with their computers. Got to make sure there's enough power plugs for all of them. And also that Wi-Fi or other internet access is adequate to handle the traffic that will be generated through the hackathon. Food and coffee are very important. People are going to be hardworking from 9 in the morning till 5 or 6 at night, and they need to be fed. So if that can be provided, that's great. If not, a lot of times people will be coming from other locations that they may not be familiar with your area. So at least having some recommendations about places nearby where they can go get lunch or coffee can be helpful so that people aren't spending a lot of time wandering around trying to get food. Another thing to consider is how are participants going to communicate with each other both before, during, and after the hackathon. One of the things that I have done is look at, I've done a little bit of research on hackathons, and I've looked at sort of the characteristics of teams that work out well and actually come up with a final product. And a lot of these teams have actually had communication before the hackathon starts. Most of that has been in the form of a Slack channel, which is a free sort of project management chat source that you can get. And so having that space available for participants to be able to at least sort of introduce themselves and figure out who's in their group and all that kind of stuff can be helpful before the hackathon. It's also helpful during the hackathon. Things happen, people are running late, people get lost. So at least, having ways that people can get in touch with each other is helpful. And then afterwards, like Ben said, a lot of, or some teams do end up writing a manuscript. And so that will sometimes involve some work after the hackathon is over. So you might want to think about, is there a way to sort of facilitate that communication after the hackathon? And then finally, a consideration with any sort of, professional event where you're getting a lot of people together is a code of conduct, just to ensure that everyone knows what are the expectations about behavior and how to interact appropriately. So during the hackathon, it's a super exciting thing to get involved with. And now that you've sort of like laid the groundwork with the preparation, it's super interesting to see how it plays out. A couple of things to consider as the hackathon is going on. One, I mentioned earlier, having that support staff, making it clear to everyone who's available to handle troubleshooting. If they have problems, who can they ask, so that things get worked out and people don't get hung up, trying to handle little problems with the time that they should be spending coding. It's important to have, I think, a leader who is able to motivate people and keep energy up. I can say from having participated in hackathons, by the end of the 3rd day, you are very tired. It's a lot of work. But having a good organizer or leader who is very motivating and gets people excited about it is a great way to ensure that people power through to the last end and get that project done and present to the group. I think it's also important to remember that you may have to be flexible with the problems that you're working with or the approaches that you're taking to solving them. In several of the hackathons that I've been involved in, teams, for whatever reason, for no fault of their own, end up the approach that they planned doesn't work. And teams that ultimately succeed are the ones that are okay with that. They take another approach, they try something else, and ultimately, even though their first approach didn't work, they still come out of the hackathon with a positive feeling about the experience. We've talked a couple times about or we've mentioned the manuscripts. Documentation and writing of what's happening at the hackathon is super important. Even if teams don't plan to write a formal manuscript, it's really important that they document their work, because that's the way to really ensure that people are going to use these tools afterwards. If people don't, clearly document what the tool does and how it's used, people aren't going to be able to make use of that tool. And then finally, I think it's important, again, to encourage networking, that this isn't just an event that people are coming to work and solve a problem, but it is a social event. It is sort of an educational event, and it's a great way for people to meet colleagues that they wouldn't have otherwise met, and some great connections can be made that way. So here is a sample schedule for a 3-day hackathon that starts at 9 a.m. each day and ends around 6. So on day 1, of course, you want to leave plenty of time for introductions so that people get to know each other. And then we've found with past experience that it's actually useful for people to plan in the morning of the first day, not really to even start coding, but just to really sort of think through how they're going to approach the project and what sort of steps are they going to take to do that. You'll see that each day has a time for a working lunch and group presentations. Like I said earlier, we have sort of planned that groups present their work to the whole of the hackathon, and that actually ends up being really useful because people who are in other groups often have feedback or questions that sort of inspire the team to take another approach, or maybe somebody has a solution to a problem that they had. So saving that time for people to have that sort of interaction between the different groups is really useful. You'll see that most of the time is spent on the actual coding and building stuff. But there are also times on days 2 and 3 where there are writers group breakouts. So typically in the NCBI hackathons, each team is asked to designate a writer who will be sort of the point person for the documentation. And that hour each day sort of gives them time to get together with the other writers in the group and to get together with the organizer. And in the case of the hackathons that I've been involved with, to get in touch with me as the sort of librarian editing assistant person to give them some feedback and info about how they could improve what they're writing or what they should be thinking about in terms of publishing. And then you'll also see that these schedules include some social events. So typically on the first day, dinner is on your own, or people are encouraged to go with a group. On the second day, we often have a group dinner where everyone gets together and goes out somewhere, and that's really fun. And people get to talk with people in other groups that they haven't really worked with as much. So it's kind of a cool thing to do. And then on the last day, time for final presentations. And I always really like the award ceremonies. Ben always gives out sort of fun awards. I have won the award for worst at darts, so that was very exciting. So it's, again, a good way to sort of wrap everything up and bring together the teams at the end. So I do want to take just a moment to talk a little bit about roles for librarians, because whether you are a librarian yourself who's watching this and you're thinking about hosting a hackathon, or you're someone else who is thinking about running a hackathon, you might want to consider involving a librarian. So a little bit to touch on here about some potential roles for librarians. So one is that sort of background literature searching. I mentioned that it's kind of important to ensure that the work that you're doing is, for a problem that hasn't been solved yet. So librarians are great at searching the literature and can do some of that background work. For managing the data and for finding the data, librarians can also be very helpful. There's a lot of data that gets involved in hackathons, and that can be a great way for librarians who have that expertise to get involved. Librarians also often have expertise with open tools, so things that people might be able to use that are things like the Open Science Framework, et cetera. And so librarians can be useful in advising on how teams can use some of those tools. And then finally, that scholarly communication piece, since this is a very fast-paced sort of scientific setting, the teams that I have worked with have found it very useful to have someone who can sort of help them along with getting that publication ready and advise on some of the things that they might want to consider with publishing. So as I mentioned, this was sort of the distillation of a larger document that is available at the URL below. This did come out of a hackathon that was at the New York Genome Center that I was the team lead for, and I had a group of 4 awesome people who helped to basically create a document to help people like you who might want to run a hackathon with thinking about what has to get done. So I hope you'll find that useful. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ben now, who's going to talk a little bit about sort of wrapping this up with the final 10 rules for running hackathon.
Thanks, Lisa. So as you can see, we've developed a model which is almost certainly some sort of local maximum, but it is effective in getting domain experts to generate a ton of code pertinent to data science. So we have some sort of rules, guidelines really, to make these things more effective, and I'm going to go through them quickly so we can get to time for questions and discussion. Number 1, we open source pretty much everything. There have been 1 or 2 very, very specific exceptions where things were not sort of strictly open, but almost everything is open source. We often use the MIT license. This allows for both commercial and non-commercial use of the products that are generated in hackathons. 2, document everything. So I often tell hackathon participants that if they don't document what they're doing, then it will cease to exist as soon as the hackathon is over. So it's very important to have good GitHub documentation, as well as hopefully a manuscript, blog post, something like that. And what we have found is people really do read the blog posts as well as the manuscripts. And we've made templates for both manuscripts and the GitHub documentation. And actually, we're working on also getting some of the descriptors harmonized to software ontologies such that they're easily findable. And please feel free to check that out on GitHub. And also, there's a manuscript template on the repo that Lisa just mentioned. Also, appropriate scoping is important. I can tell you from personal experience that if you're building a tool which involves building a complicated back end and a complicated front end, it's probably too hard. Your friends will likely persevere and try to build something awesome, but they may be angry at you for a few weeks. Also, be flexible. A bunch of amazing hackathon veterans realized on the last day of a hackathon that what they were trying to build just wasn't working. So in the last few hours of a hackathon, they pivoted, realized they could call variants from single-cell RNA-seq data sets, put together a framework for that, and then it was picked up in another hackathon and became a full-fledged tool. So this is something I'm very proud of. This full-fledged tool just came out a few days ago. So that's something that's really neat, and something the full-fledged tool is really just sort of approaching an alpha state, but I really hope we can go further from there. So this does streaming analysis of variants in single-cell RNA-seq. So I just threw about half of the buzzwords in bioinformatics at you in one sentence. Also, education is a big thing, particularly educating, as I've mentioned a couple of times, educating domain experts in modern coding practices. And so one thing we've really emphasized a lot is containerization using Docker, Singularity. We're moving into Rocket. We also talk about workflow languages like Common Workflow Language, Nextflow, SnakeMake, those types of things. Diversity is key. I know this shows up in a lot of presentations and people pay lip service to it, but I can say that from what I have seen, the more diverse your teams are, the more successful they are likely to be. Sometimes you'll get a team, everybody from one institution. They are sometimes way less successful than teams that are mixed up of a bunch of people from different backgrounds, different demographics as well. And I think that's really important. Lisa also mentioned trying to recruit women to hackathons. And so doing proactive things like reaching out to women who code groups, things like that, I think is a fairly effective means of doing something like that. Time for networking is extremely important. I think the three things that people get out of hackathons are production, education, and networking. And we see that people know each other professionally, get jobs, so on and so forth as a result of these hackathons. And really, in my opinion, there is no better job interview. I mean, really, people can fake a code test. They cannot fake being able to perform in a hackathon for 3 days. You know exactly what people can do and what they can't do, and how quickly they can adapt. One thing that's important is especially the last day. If you're running a hackathon, your participants will be so motivated and many of them will try to skip lunch. So it is very, very important on the last day of a hackathon to make sure that everyone eats. Sharing with the world. One problem we find in domain expert written generated software in general is that it is not advertised. And so we're constantly looking at new ways to share hackathon projects with the world. And so if you can recruit people like Jason Williams with big Twitter followings to tweet about your hackathon and your hackathon products, that's great. If you can get your institution involved, that's awesome. And here again, librarians are key, I think, in helping to advertise. Both actually before a hackathon in terms of recruiting people. Many of our hackathons, a lot of the attendees are recruited by librarians, and then also at the end in terms of advertising the code generated in the hackathon. The last thing is be awesome. Like work with people and try to be cool. Really, people tend to get along exceptionally well in these events. People typically have a lot of fun. They typically want to come back. There's no reason if you run a hackathon it should be any different. Also, in the state of awesome, I wanted to sort of give some acknowledgments. Obviously, this is a huge program. It's involved hundreds and hundreds of people at this point, and will likely involve hundreds and hundreds more. Really, this couldn't happen without the librarians and institutional support at the various institutions where these things take place. Obviously, the hackathon participants themselves, particularly the team leads, and then also computational support. So we've had computational support from Amazon, from Google, Microsoft is talking to us, and from the NSF. So those people are fantastic. So thank you to everybody who's ever been involved with a hackathon. I know some of you are listening to the webinar. And with that, Lisa and I would like to take questions from the audience. So apparently there are a lot of questions. So somebody said, I'd like to go to a 3-day hackathon as a viewer. If I can only go on one day, which day should I go to? So it depends on why you want to view the hackathon, I think. If you were viewing it with a mind to running one, what I would do is if logistical stuff allowed, I would go for the first hour and a half, and then I would go the middle of the second day to look at the sort of intermediate projects, and then I would go to the final project presentations. And I might also stop by a writers meeting. I mean, if it happened to be sort of on the same campus where you are. That's a good question. Lisa, did you have?
Yeah, I think if you can't split up your day and go to each different part of the 3 days, I would say probably the last day is where you're going to get the best sense of what people have done, what is feasible in a hackathon. That gives you a chance to go to a writers meeting. It gives you also a chance to just kind of even see the last day, like how I would say a lot of stuff gets done the last day. So the third day is when I would go.
So another question was for diversity and inclusion, what are some examples of places you've advertised? And so what was successful and what wasn't? That's an interesting question. So like I said, we try to get out to community groups who represent sort of underrepresented populations in the hackathons. Also, many of our hackathons are oversubscribed. So we're optimizing for a lot of variables. So one of the variables we're obviously optimizing for is sort of coding prowess. So we do take, some people who are good coders or some people who are scientific experts in particular things we're interested in. But we also take people to optimize for diversity. So if there are people that are really good but might bring a sort of different perspective to the hackathons, then we try to include them as well.
Yeah, and I would also say to kind of think outside the box about where to reach people. Like I think Twitter can be a very effective means of reaching people that may not be as tapped into like listservs and groups and that kind of thing.
Okay, so someone asked, who's been in many hackathons, how do you specifically find team leads? Do you separately advertise for these? Which is a bit of a loaded question. So, and the reason is because we often put out bulk solicitations for team leads. Months before the hackathons start, we ask for project proposals, we ask for team leads, and I will tell you that with the exception of a few cases, that is typically not successful. So then what I try to do is get together with the other hackathon organizers and we harass our friends and colleagues to be team leads. Typically, these people are sort of assistant professors or senior postdocs, although I've seen some more senior people do an amazing job of leading teams, and that's been really fun. You know who you are. So that is absolutely a challenge to find team leads. But I will say that problem has been ameliorated as of late because when we first started running these things, if a team lead got sick or something, which does happen, often that team would fall apart. But now there's a whole cadre of hackathon alumni all over North America. And so typically we can ask a hackathon alum to step in as a team lead. And if really once most people have been through at least one or two hackathons, I mean, they're really kind of qualified to be a team lead. So now we're doing more and more reaching out to or sort of drafting alumni for that purpose. Somebody asked, where are best practices for provision of librarian services? And I think that's a more appropriate question for Lisa.
I guess what I think you're asking is like guidance for librarians about how to get involved. If you check out that GitHub repo that I had the link up for, there is actually a page. There's like a table of contents on that GitHub repo, and one of the entries in it is rules for librarians. So there's a little bit of info there. I have also worked with a lot of librarians that are going to be sort of the librarian contact at hackathons that are being run elsewhere. So if you have specific questions and you kind of would like some guidance from someone who has been there, I'm happy to assist with that.
I guess this is sort of more of a clarification question, but it's an excellent question. In hackathons where participants don't usually know each other beforehand. What advice do you have getting teams to form? And this is a place where NIH hackathons really diverge from other types of hackathons, where sort of teams kind of slowly form organically. So what we do is we pre-scope the teams. So we ask people in the application form to cite the 3 teams they'd most like to be on, and also tell us a little bit about their scientific as well as coding experience. And based on that and some of the other factors I mentioned before, we actually pre-assign people to teams. Now, that is not to say that people, absolutely can't switch teams. So it's usually 3 or 4 people before a hackathon will email me and say, I really wanted to be on this other team. And in most cases, we can accommodate. Some teams are much more popular than others. So we do the best we can. Also, in almost every hackathon, we have given people the opportunity halfway through to switch their teams, and we worked it out with their teams. In almost every hackathon, I would say 14 hackathons, we've seen maybe 2 or 3 people switch teams. We had one hackathon where for some reason it was like musical chairs and lots of people were switching, although for some reason that hackathon was also very productive. That was at the New York Genome Center. For reasons I don't understand, but typically people really get into their team. I mean, like I said, 14 out of 15 hackathons, people really get into their team and they are loath to leave their team. It's a very rare event. I think Peter Cooper, by the way, thanks to Peter Cooper for sort of riding shotgun on this webinar. I think he posted my email address in case anyone wants to get a hold of me. I try not to Google myself, but I'm pretty sure Lisa and I are fairly Googleable entities. Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to end. I hope everybody has a fantastic week. I hope sometime in the next year you have a chance to participate in an NCBI hackathon or someone else's hackathon. By the way, there's lots of awesome hackathons going on out there. There's a whole bunch of cool ones in Europe, particularly run by Elixir. Brad Chapman is running a Bosk hackathon at the End of the Galaxy Community Conference. We're working on building a website, sort of a one-stop shopping place to find all these bio hackathons. Actually, we're going to build that at Brad Chapman's hackathon, if you're interested in working on that, and have web development skills. Anyway, but I hope you sign up for a hackathon soon. Please feel free to email me if you have questions. Peter gives my email address to too many people, so if you don't get a response right away, please just email me again a week later. I'm usually pretty good on the second one. And with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic week, month, year. Have a good day. Bye-bye.